For over 2 centuries, Russia held Central Asia in a firm geopolitical grip, shaping its borders, its politics, and its pipelines. But today, that grip is slipping. Slowly but surely, China is muscling in, investing billions, building roads, buying influence, and rewriting the rules of the game. To understand what's happening today, we need to go back to 1991. When the Soviet Union collapsed, 5 Central Asian republics suddenly found themselves independent: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. These weren't just random countries. They controlled vast energy resources and sat at the crossroads between Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Russia's response was swift and calculated. Moscow created the Commonwealth of Independent States, established military bases, and maintained economic control through energy partnerships and the ruble. For 3 decades, Russia treated Central Asia like a vassal region, appointing friendly leaders and extracting resources at below-market prices. The Kremlin's message was clear: you may be independent on paper, but you're still in our sphere of influence. Russia's influence was not just political. Cultural ties, such as the widespread use of the Russian language and Soviet-era infrastructure, kept Central Asia closely aligned with Moscow. For example, many Central Asian elites were educated in Russia, and Russian media remained dominant. While Russia was busy projecting power through military might and political pressure, China was playing a completely different game. In 2013, President Xi Jinping launched the Belt and Road Initiative, a large infrastructure project in human history. And Central Asia? It became the crown jewel of this ambitious plan. Trade between China and the region expanded rapidly. From $460 million at diplomatic inception to $89 billion in 2023. That's a nearly 200-fold increase in just 3 decades. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 accelerated this shift. The war has drained Russia's resources, weakened its military reputation, and raised concerns among Central Asian leaders about Moscow's reliability. As Russia focuses westward, a vacuum has emerged in Central Asia, one that China is eager to fill. China's strategy in Central Asia is masterful in its simplicity. Make yourself indispensable. While Russia demanded loyalty through threats and coercion, China offered something irresistible: money, infrastructure, and economic growth without political strings attached. Let's start with Kazakhstan, Central Asia's largest economy. In 2005, Chinese companies began investing heavily in Kazakhstani oil fields. By 2024, China had become Kazakhstan's largest oil customer, purchasing over 500,000 barrels per day. But the Chinese didn't stop there. They built the Kazakhstan-China Oil Pipeline, a 2,800-kilometer engineering marvel that completely bypassed Russian territory. Suddenly, Kazakhstan had an alternative to Russian export routes, and with it, genuine economic independence. In Uzbekistan, Chinese companies have constructed modern highways, high-speed rail lines, and industrial parks. The China Central Asia Gas Pipeline, completed in 2009, has fundamentally altered the region's energy export dynamics. Instead of being forced to sell gas to Russia at below-market rates, Central Asian countries can now access the lucrative Chinese market directly. But perhaps the most telling example is the Silk Road Economic Belt. This network of highways, railways, and pipelines connects Central Asia directly to Chinese markets, creating economic corridors that completely bypass Russia. What once required Russian permission and Russian infrastructure can now flow directly east to China. Russia's decline in Central Asia isn't just about China's rise. It's about Moscow's own strategic blunders that have alienated the very countries it sought to control. The first major mistake was treating Central Asian countries as subordinates rather than partners. When oil prices were high in the 2000s, Russia used its energy wealth to maintain dominance through the stick rather than the carrot. Moscow demanded that Central Asian countries sell their natural resources at discounted rates, restricted their ability to diversify export routes, and used economic pressure to maintain political compliance. Once one of the world's most isolated countries, Uzbekistan has opened its borders, liberalized its economy, and actively courted international investment. Chinese companies have poured billions into Uzbekistani infrastructure, creating jobs and modernizing the country's industrial base. But perhaps the most telling indicator of changing power dynamics is the emergence of new multilateral institutions. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, originally dominated by Russia, has evolved into a China-led forum for regional cooperation. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, headquartered in Beijing, has become a major source of development financing for Central Asian projects. Chinese investments have brought tangible benefits, but also challenges. The modernization of a power plant, funded by a 386 million Chinese loan, failed in 2018, leaving the city without heat during a cold snap. Debt is another concern. Kyrgyzstan owes China $1.7 billion, about 45% of its external debt, raising fears of a debt trap. China's influence extends beyond economics and security. Tourism from China to Central Asia is booming. In 2024, Kazakhstan saw 665,000 Chinese visitors, up from 367,000 in 2023, spending $307 million. Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan have also seen sharp increases, facilitated by relaxed visa policies. Perhaps the most dramatic shift in regional influence is occurring in the military sphere. Russia's traditional dominance in arms sales to Central Asia is being challenged by Chinese manufacturers offering modern equipment at competitive prices. The potential sale of Chinese JF-17 fighter jets to Uzbekistan represents a particularly significant development, as it would mark the first major Central Asian purchase of Chinese combat aircraft. China's military cooperation extends beyond arms sales to include technology transfer and training programs. The sale of air defense systems to Uzbekistan and drones to Kazakhstan demonstrates Beijing's willingness to provide sensitive military technology to regional partners. Russia's decline in Central Asia represents a loss of strategic depth that has implications far beyond the region itself. Central Asia has traditionally served as Russia's southern buffer, providing strategic depth and serving as a launching pad for influence projection into Afghanistan, Iran, and South Asia. The loss of this influence creates a strategic vacuum that China is systematically filling. Moscow's traditional tools of influence, energy dependence, military cooperation, and cultural affinity have all been weakened by the Ukraine war and China's systematic alternative offerings. The sanctions regime has disrupted financial flows, the war has redirected military resources, and China's economic attractions have provided alternatives to Russian partnerships. The transformation of Central Asia from the Russian sphere of influence to the Chinese economic zone appears to be irreversible. The infrastructure investments, trade relationships, and institutional frameworks that China has established create long-term dependencies that will be difficult to unwind. The China-Central Asia Summit mechanism, the Belt and Road Initiative projects, and the growing web of economic relationships represent a new regional architecture that explicitly excludes Russia. As of now, China has not completely displaced Russia. Moscow still wields military power and cultural influence, but the tide is turning, slowly and probably irreversibly. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.